Hi, my name is Marina Silk, and today I will walk you through the Roundhouse from the perspective of Joe Coutts, who is the protagonist. And Joe is only 13 years old when the novel begins, and he's living a pretty typical Ojibwe native life on his reservation in North Dakota. And he's between an age where he's old enough to understand the world, but still young enough to believe that adult can fix things. And so the story shows him spending time with his family, with his dad, helping around the household, and having like a really loving household with where his mom Geraldine is the center of their family. Um, Himself and his dad, Basil, look forward to having dinners together and spending time with each other. Pretty much their world relying on the, their the female in the household until one summer afternoon when their world is completely changed and the mother, her name is Geraldine, um, their world changes when she's violently attacked or assaulted at the roundhouse, which is a tribal sacred space, and it really just isolates her after this happens, and she does survive, but she just retreats into herself. And in the story, Joe just sees herself barely um, coming out of her room, barely speaking. She would barely eat, and it just hurts him to see her in that way because for all his life that was the strongest person he ever knew, and up to that point had become after that point just became very unreachable. And from Joe's point of view, it's terrifying because he loses his mother's presence and this sense of safety she's always represented. And so his parents work for the tribal court system. His dad is a tribal judge, and his mom works as the tribal clerk. So for this to happen on the reservation is very hard and sad to hear about. Well, read about, because these two hold positions in the tribal court systems, yet weren't served justice when this happened to Geraldine, who is a tribal clerk. And so throughout the story, Joe hears his father talking about, legal terms. I know Joe and his dad would talk about what had happened, getting bits of like this pieces together, trying to, and Joe just took it on to himself to investigate himself and try to figure out, who did this to his mother. So it was devastated him, and he felt responsible in a way to have to look for the person that did this to his mother. And the assault happened where the jurisdiction overlap. We see it, the overlap in at a tribal, state, and federal level. So because of all those boundaries, maybe no one could persecute the man who hurt Geraldine, his mother. So Joe realizes that the system was or is not built to protect Native women, and Joe refuses to accept that. So he gets his best friend, Cappy, in the book, and they start gathering clues. They go to the roundhouse and get all these little clues and do their own little investigation to try to piece together what happened. And from Joe's perspective, during this time, he feels a mix of emotions, and he believes that if he finds the truth, that justice would follow. But he learns that that is not true, and that the adults that knew of the truth and what had happened to his mother couldn't just act on what had happened. So this is where Joe realizes that justice would not come through the courts, and that the law is structured to fail his family. And so he begins to believe he has to do something. And later on in the book, Joe eventually kills Lyden Lark with the help of his best friend Cappy. And it actually wasn't like something he was proud of, and actually was a burden on him because he knew what he did was wrong. And although he believed that this was going to protect his mother, his community, and maybe even the integrity of the roundhouse, he also knew that he crossed the line, and that line, you couldn't uncross it. So he is only 13, and that's an act that would later shape the rest of his life. And this had a bad ripple effect after the death happened, the murder happened, and Cappy, his best friend, eventually dies after helping Joe commit murder. And although Joe carried the knowledge and knew he acted outside the law, first the law failed his mother and his family. That's bad and sad, very sad on both sides of these incidences. And the book doesn't end with closure. It just leaves you with an understanding that there's no justice in Indian country, and these issues are complicated, painful, and are still carried by the individuals and family members that are least prepared for it. And we saw that in the Roundhouse book. And I just want to point out too, we still see these issues on reservations and Native communities throughout the U.S. to this day. So this novel isn't just fiction, it's real and an ongoing crisis in Native communities. Because although there are jurisdictional laws, these laws make it impossible to hold a non-Native offender accountable on tribal land. And most of these violent assaults happen on tribal reservations, and the perpetrators are non-Native. And most tribal nations can't prosecute these non-Native offenders, even when the crime happens on tribal land. And then it's just that gap in legal authority that creates the kind of situations that we saw in Joe's family, and that it's a failed system. Very sad and very real. So it's a crisis we still see today, and Joe Coutts' story gives us a way to understand that Christ is through the eyes of a child who refused to accept that failure.